So let me start with a question to all of you guys. Do you know even what money is? Can you define money? And do you know what's the difference between money and currency? I know most of you would think of these paper notes that all of us use every day, but that's not really money, and I'm gonna explain to you why. Let's start from the beginning. For let's say around almost 5,000 years, people were using gold and silver as their predominant form of money. And you would think like why people were using gold and silver before and why we are using paper currency now. Well, there is a very easy explanation. Gold and silver basically cover all the major requirements of what money is supposed to be. So money should be an easy medium of exchange. Basically, gold and silver store a big amount of value in a small place. So it's easy to transport and easy to carry. Also, it's durable. So gold and silver normally do not corrode for a long periods of time. It's divisible. You can make change. You can have a big coin and you can have small coins. So you would accept either way. Also, it's fungible. Fungible means that pure gold is the same wherever it is on Earth. So basically, if you find gold in, let's say in America, would be the same as the gold in Europe. It's all the same. It's not different types of gold that exist. Gold is gold, and whatever it is on Earth. It's a store of value. That's the most important part that we're gonna come to when we speak about Weimar Germany, because gold and silver store and maintain their purchasing power over long periods of time, while fiat currency that we are using today by their very design, they are designed to lose value over long periods of time. So how we switched from good quality money to fiat currency was basically around 150 years ago, when people started depositing their gold and silver in a bank, and the bank would give them a claim check for gold. So it would say that you have certain amount, X amount of gold in the bank, and they will give you this receipt. And this receipt, people started using it as money, as good as money, because instead of going to the bank and getting your gold and paying the merchant or whatever you want to buy, you would just give him this receipt and he can go from the bank and collect it himself. So these receipts would look something like this. And this looks a lot like what we are using today, but the major difference is today there is no backing of these paper currencies with any gold in a bank. You cannot go to the bank with this piece of paper and say, I want my gold, because there is no any gold in the bank. What gives value to this piece of paper is the government's confidence. And what this means is basically the government in the country in which you live in, they say, okay, we accept this currency as a payment when you have to pay debts, or when we collect taxes, or when we pay you your wage. So coming back to Germany in 1914, this is what happened. So basically all the currency that Germany was using was representing gold and silver in the bank, but they broke the tie, so people were not allowed anymore to go to the bank and claim their gold for their currency, because the government now can print more receipts for gold than there actually is. So they can print more money and spend more for the war. So during the war, the currency supply of Germany expanded 4 times. So they printed 4 times more currency than they used to have before to be able to pay for the war through deficit spending. And what deficit spending is, when you take up 10 million marks in taxes but you spend 20 million, the extra 10 million is considered deficit spending. So you're spending more than your income. But inflation still didn't pick up. Prices didn't rise 4 times during the war, because people tend to save during war times because they're not confident enough to go outside and spend it. So people tend to save all their currency. But as soon as the war ended, this is when the economy got into trouble. So Milton Friedman defines inflation as the expansion of the currency supply. But when Germany expanded their currency supply, prices didn't rise straight away. Why? It's because of velocity. And velocity is very important for you to have inflation and rising prices, because velocity measures how many times each unit of currency exchanges hands. So for example, if you have people spending more money and going out and being confident and happy, velocity is high. After World War I, people started spending more money. So now all this excess currency that the government printed during war times was out in the open and people were spending it. So what happened? Well, prices rose 10 times. So all the people who kept their savings in the national currency realized that their savings can buy 10 times less stuff as they used to buy during the war. So basically their purchasing power got stolen away by the government, which was printing money and paying for the war. That's how the everyday person got hit by the hidden tax of inflation. So after a while, between 1920 and 1922, inflation slowed down. So on the surface, things were looking quite great, but the government kept printing money. Why? Because they had to pay war reparation. And war reparation is when a country loses, they owe money to the country which is victorious. Because the government was in debt, they had to keep printing money to pay off their debts. So they keep expanding the currency supply in the country, but what this caused even more inflation. So then by the summer of 1922, prices started rising again. And this time, people did not wait for the prices to wipe out their purchasing power. As soon as they sensed that the prices are rising again, everybody rushed to spend their currency as soon as they get their hands into it. So that the velocity increased dramatically, so inflation got out of hands, and now it turned into a hyperinflation. At some point, prices were doubling every day. You would go on to buy a pair of shoes which would cost 50 marks, and the next day they would cost 100. And then the day after they would cost 200. This is how bad it was, because the government was just printing money and paying for its debt. It was so bad that the government ran out of paper during this time, so they had to use other material to print money. Basically, they would get a piece of wool or a piece of silk and they would write down numbers on it. 3 trillion. There you go, that's currency now. And that's just because the government said so, now people can use it for currency. That's how insane it was in Germany in 1922. And then what happened in the end was people who had their savings in the German mark lost almost all of its purchasing power. They got wiped out. So you could have sold your house just a year ago and then decided to save the money to use it after a year, but because of inflation now you can't buy anymore a house. You couldn't buy almost anything now with your money. So that's basically how your prosperity was stolen from you to the government. So the lessons to be learned for these days is that when the government is doing deficit spending, it will inevitably at some point cause inflation in some shape or another. Currencies are not designed to store value. By their very nature, they leak and you lose purchasing power every single year, or sometimes every single day. After the war ended in 1918, the government of Germany was printing their way out of debt. They printed away, inflated away the prosperity of their whole society. And this is what happened in Weimar, Germany after World War I. Hope you found the episode interesting, and I would always appreciate a thumbs up. Thank you again for watching, and see you next time with another episode of The Hidden Wars.